All right, so good morning, good afternoon. We got people from all over the place today, and welcome into another awesome Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you're joining us for the first time today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world, and no one embodies that more than our speaker today, who I will get to in just a quick second. I did want to highlight that the whole month of February, we spend the entire month kicking out all the men and spending it entirely showcasing amazing women in science and exploration from around the globe. February 11th is the International Day for Women in Science and Technology, and so we always do about 50 programs in the month with just the most amazing people worldwide. So thank you all so much for joining us for that, and I'm so excited to dive in with today's speaker, and that is Dr. Aerin Jacob, who, mind-blowingly, just before this broadcast, got to tell me that she literally got off the helicopter, ran into the hotel to get ready for today's program. That does not happen very often for us, even with our standard of speakers, so that's pretty exciting to dive in with today's broadcast. We are going to have a Kahoot quiz today, too. I'm mixing up how I do this introduction today because my brain is fried, but we're going to have a fun Kahoot quiz. If you guys want to get ready, Kahoot.it on YouTube live classes. We'll play that game at the end of the broadcast before the Q&A. And now, without further ado, Dr. Aerin Jacob is joining us live in Alberta, and she is with the Yellowstone to Yukon initiative, where she works as a conservation scientist. She gets to help protect one of the most amazing corridors, one of the most amazing places, not just in Canada and the US, but on the planet for wildlife. And so she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, how she got involved with all this amazing stuff, and why the Yellowstone to Yukon corridor is such a special place worthy of protection. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Jacob. And take us away.
Thank you, Jesse. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. And Jesse's right. I did just get off a helicopter about 20 minutes ago and came back to my hotel room, where I am in Golden, BC, which is in that red dot in the middle of the slide. And it's really exciting because I don't get to do that very often. So it's really nice to be able to talk to you about some of the work that we do at Yellowstone to Yukon and all across this whole amazing region. So some of you may have been to or heard about the greater Yellowstone ecosystem in the United States, which is the white dot at the bottom of the screen. And some of you may have heard about or been to or maybe even live in the Yukon territory, which is the big white dot at the top of the screen. And I work through this whole region from Yellowstone to Yukon. And the organization I work for is an environmental charity called Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative. And we work across this huge area, which is 1.3 million square kilometers big. That's twice the size of Alberta or twice the size of Texas. It's nearly 3,500 kilometers or 2,000 miles long. It's huge and it's magnificent. This is one of my favorite places on earth, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it. And try to move to the next slide. Jesse, tell me if it stops working right, because it's a little bit different on one computer these days.
Yeah, it hasn't got to the next slide yet, just so you know. I know we had a little trouble getting screen share working.
Oh, yeah. Should be on the next slide for me. Oh, dear. Well,
it's half the fun.
See. What's that?
It's half the fun. Something has to go a little strangely.
It is half the fun, yeah. Maybe should I stop sharing and try again?
Stop sharing, try again, and we'll see if we can get it back up perfectly.
Okay. See, everyone, you know what? Often people think that science is perfect. It's not. Science is about experimentation, and this is also how we do it. So I'm going to try to share my screen again and see if it works this time. Jesse, can you see a blue pool on the left side and a person in a red jacket on the right side?
Right now, it's still thinking about it. It really wants to work from your computer at home. No, oh yes, you got it. The Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, Yukon Territory. Fingers crossed.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll try to indicate clearly when I'm switching slides, and then Jesse, please tell me if it's not working properly. So everybody, the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem is it's famous for these amazing geological features, like this brilliant pool that you see in front of you. And let me tell you, you would not want to put any part of your body in that pool. It is so hot, and it smells really funny there. All very, very geologically active and famous for geysers that shoot out into the air. And millions of people come from all around North America, all around the world, to visit the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem. It's also really important for wildlife, and it's very important for people. Indigenous people have lived in that area for thousands and thousands of years. It's very important to them. Similarly, was the Yukon territory, which is at the other end of the Yellowstone to Yukon corridor. The Yukon territory is magnificent. It is big and wild. There's not as many people who live up there, although people have lived there for a long, long time, and they will for a long, long time. These places are really important for all kinds of people, and I feel really lucky to be able to work in them and to work for their protection. So I'm going to change slides now to the next slide. Whoops. These are some of the kind of people who live and work and play in these places. So there are a lot of people in the middle of those two areas who have ranches and farms. This is where a lot of our food comes from. There's also really active forestry in some of these places. Some of you might live in houses that are made of wood or have families that work in forestry. Many people who come to recreate in this place or who live here, one of the reasons they love living in the Yellowstone to Yukon region is for wonderful outdoor recreation. And of course, these places are culturally important, spiritually important, and have long histories with Indigenous people, Native American tribes, First Nations, Métis people in Canada. And these places are so important for wildlife. The pictures on this are some of my favorite animal species. So in the top left, that's a wolverine, which is kind of like if you crossed a German Shepherd with a corgi, maybe you get something like a wolverine. They have this reputation as being really, really fierce. They're a biggest member of the weasel family, but wolverines are also really shy. Wolverines have this really soft, vulnerable side to them. They don't like being around a lot of people. They don't like being around a lot of human activity. On the upper right-hand side is one of my favorites. This is a caribou, mountain caribou. And they are, I just think of them as being these kind of ghosts in the woods, moving in and out of the forest. You hardly ever see them. Buffalo, also called bison in the bottom left, and they're famous in Yellowstone and all the way up into the Yukon. And they're coming back into some of the places where they've been absent for hundreds of years because of overhunting. And on the bottom right is a Western toad. I love Western toads. They're just some of the cutest little creatures you'll ever see. And so there's all kinds of animals that live in the Yellowstone to Yukon region, all kinds of people who live, work, and play here. And we get tons of benefits from this area, everything from clean water to fresh air, all kinds of stuff. It's very important for people and for nature. So I want to show you one of the things that is wonderful about animals, and especially in this region. So one of those things that makes animals different from plants, different from fungi, different from other creatures, is that animals need to move. So you are going to see the footprints of a mule deer. Her number was 225. She was given that number by scientists, who travels each year. She travels 400 kilometers. She has to do it twice a year, and once she does it while she's pregnant. So this is going to be south of Yellowstone National Park. Watch for those purple footprints to show up now. You can see her going, and she's moving through Wyoming, up through the Grand Tetons, up through Yellowstone. She'll stay in that area for a little while and then turn around and make that reverse journey. She needs to move, and so do her babies, across big landscapes. Similarly, so do other wildlife. This is going to be footprints of a grizzly bear. She was given the name Ethel by scientists, and she went for a long walk, more than almost 4,500 kilometers long. This is a little bit further north in Montana and Idaho. So you can see her footprint. She's coming out of Glacier National Park. She's coming through Montana. She's thinking about, oh, there's some towns, there's some busy roads. I need to be safe. Go into Idaho, come back to Montana, and look at her. You can see in that picture, she's actually having a look around some of these structures that people have built. And one of the things we want to do is to make sure that Ethel and her babies stay safe, don't get into trouble with people. So I'm going to talk about that in a little while. And the last one is a famous wolf. Her name was Pluie, and she traveled more than 100,000 square kilometers over a 2-year period. Pluie was what an athlete to be able to do that. So you're going to see her footprints start outside Banff National Park in Canada, coming through Alberta. She crosses the border. She doesn't need a passport. She goes through Montana, Idaho, back up into Alberta and British Columbia. And Pluie in particular taught scientists that animals need to move these enormous distances It's not just enough that Pluie was born and lived next to Banff National Park, which is a huge national park in Canada. Pluie had to move through all these other areas, and lots of other wolves do too. Lots of other animals do. We really need to keep that in mind with wildlife. Parks, no matter, even if they're big places like Glacier, Banff, Yellowstone, they're not big enough for healthy populations of wildlife because animals need to move. But people haven't always thought about that. Sometimes when we do activities like we log in places that we shouldn't, or we log too much, we can damage those habitats. We also create really big dams on rivers that are meant to flow freely so that water can get downstream, so that fish can get upstream. We create that because we need electricity, but we haven't always thought ahead when we've made those decisions. And roads, we need to travel on roads. I traveled on roads to get to where I am today. But sometimes when we build roads, we don't think about the effects on wildlife. If you look at that, just above that little arrow, yellow arrow on the bottom right, you'll see a very small group of sheep. These are bighorn sheep, and you can see people who are standing on the side of the road watching them. But it's hard for those sheep to get from one side of the road to the other. So one of the things that Yellowstone to Yukon and our partners do is to help wildlife move across big spaces when they have to contend with things like this. One of the most important messages about conservation I can think of is that conservation means sharing and working together. It wasn't that long ago that my mom was telling me, you need to share your toys. We only have one sandbox, we only have one dump truck, and your friends want to use these things too. And I had to learn to share. And it's like that in the world. It's like that with science. It's like that with conservation and nature. We have to share. We have to think about everybody's needs, animals' needs, people's needs, future generations' needs, and think about the implications of our actions on each other. So I want to show you a little bit about why the Yellowstone to Yukon region is so important for animals. The map on the left-hand side will have a black outline, and that's the Yellowstone to Yukon region. It also has different colors. This is a map of North America. So the places that are green are where there are not that many of these large and medium-sized mammals that live together. You can think about those. Those are moose, fox, bison, wolves, mountain lions, bears, black bears and grizzly bears. The places that are red are where there are a lot of those animals living together. So the left-hand side is historic times, maybe 300, 400 years ago. And the right-hand side is more modern times. So you can see that today, closer to 2004, the ranges, the places where those animals live have shrunk. And they're really still in the Yellowstone to Yukon region. It's one of the reasons this place is so important for wildlife. We still have a lot of these big animals who live together. And we need to make sure that they still live here and try to help them move across other parts of that region. And what if we don't do that? What if we don't think big term? What if we don't think about the big picture and long term and think about generations from now? The sad reality is that if we don't think long term, animal species are going to go extinct. Now, this map on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, shows the historic range of grizzly bears in pink. So you can see grizzly bears used to live all the way halfway across Canada, down into the US, all through California, through the northern part of Mexico. In fact, the state of California flag has a grizzly bear on it. But there hasn't been a grizzly bear there for maybe 100 years. And that's because people hadn't been thinking big picture or long term. There were small, isolated populations of grizzly bears. That's shown in the brown areas. So in 1922, those little brown patches are where grizzly bears still lived in the US. But today, grizzly bears only live in the green areas. So they've shrunk. They used to live in the pink parts, then they were in the little brown parts too, and now they're only in the green. So except for Yellowstone, all of those populations from 1922 in the United States are gone. And that's for a number of reasons, and we have to be very cautious about how we live in the environment. Yellowstone to Yukon works on grizzly bears a lot. And the reason is that grizzly bears are called an umbrella species for conservation in the Rocky Mountains. And umbrella species is kind of a weird word. We don't think grizzly bears aren't actually umbrellas. You wouldn't want to crawl underneath one if it was raining. But it's a term that scientists use to explain that grizzly bears provide protection for a lot of other animals because they live in the same places. It's not that the grizzly bears wouldn't eat them. They would. It means that if we humans can protect what grizzly bears need, we will also help these other animals. So it gives scientists and conservationists a way of focusing. If we focus a lot of our work on grizzly bears, we'll help all these other animals too. So here's one of the ways that we try to help wildlife and to help people. And one of the key actions is through protected areas, through parks. So there's other types of protected areas too, but commonly people think of them as parks. The map on the left shows different protected areas throughout the Yellowstone to Yukon region. You can see Yellowstone National Park is down in the south, and then moving up as you go through the north on the Canada-US border, there's Glacier, there's Banff National Park, which is really close to where I live, Jasper, up into the north, places like Nahanni, Nasicho National Park Reserve. These places have grown over the last 25 years. So Yellowstone to Yukon and our partners, because remember, you have to work together, have worked really hard to ensure that there's been an 80% increase in the growth of key protected areas. So the places that were light green were there in 1993 when Y2Y first started, but the places in dark green have been expanded. And you can see that especially up in the northern part of the area. And so that's a really important part of conservation, but it's not the only thing. Remember, animals need to move. So look at these green blobs. The one on the left-hand side, there's two green blobs that are separated. And then as you go further to the right, there's some little dots that connect them. And then at the end, there's actually a line that connects them. When we think about that as connectivity, are those places connected? The ones on the left where the two green blobs are separated, those patches are not connected. And as you go a little bit further and further along, they're better connected. It means that it's easier for animals to move across that landscape. And we work hard to help animals move safely across busy landscapes. Remember, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. And we do that especially in this lower part of the Yellowstone to Yukon region in purple. So imagine if you were a bear. You've got a black bear on the left-hand side, a black bear on the right-hand side, and two grizzly bears in the middle. For you to be in a neighborhood like that, or maybe in ranch land, like the place in the middle, or crossing a busy road with cars on it, that's really dangerous. It's dangerous for the bears, and it's dangerous for people. So although we want to help animals like bears move across those landscapes, it doesn't mean we want them living in your yard. It doesn't mean we want them to hang out for a long time on somebody's ranch where they can get into trouble with calves or with lambs that might look like an easy meal. And we sure don't want them to hang out for a long time on roads. We want them to get across that road fast, safe for the animal and safe for people. So one of the ways we do that is working with people who own land, with private landowners, to help animals like grizzly bears move across these landscapes. This is a picture from southern British Columbia, very close to the border with the United States. And on the right-hand side, you can see there's a little town there. And there's a river that's coming through the middle. And then there's these sort of big kind of square areas that are yellow and brownish in the middle. And that's farmland. So what we try to do is to help grizzly bears get across that area. We don't want them to stay for a long time, but we certainly want them to be able to move fast across and get to those two separated mountain areas. And they need to do that at different times of the year, or to find mates, or to be able to find different foods. So we have to work very hard with private landowners who are saying, you know, we care about grizzly bears too. I don't want them to live in my yard. I don't want it to stay for a long time on my farm. But if you can work with me to help reduce the problems of them moving across these areas, it's better for everybody. This is a picture of one of these wildlife crossing structures. You might have seen them if you've driven in parts of Montana or in Alberta, now in British Columbia, or in different parts of the United States and Eastern Canada too. And I love this picture because I think people really understand it. They understand that if you are a bear or an elk or a moose that lives on one side of that highway, it's really hard for you to get across it. This is the Trans-Canada Highway. It's the busiest transportation corridor in all across Canada. And so what Yellowstone to Yukon and our partners do is we, in the busiest places, we build fences along the side of the highway that keeps the animals off the highway, keeps people safe because it stops them from hitting animals where we can get hurt. But we also have to build these bridges across the highway. Sometimes they go above, like that one, and sometimes they go underneath. And animals need both. So some animals, like a female grizzly bear with her cubs, she really is going to prefer that overpass, big bridge that goes over top of the highway. It's where she feels safest. And some animals prefer ones that go underneath the highway. Some don't care. They'll just take whichever one they come across first. But you need to have both in these landscapes. Wildlife crossing structures that go over and under the busy roads help to keep animals connected. And the fencing in certain places helps to keep them safe because it keeps them off the road. Now, this isn't a solution that's going to work everywhere. I'm not saying we should fence every single road. But in the places where it is the busiest roads, where we know it's a barrier to animals moving, or where they get hit by cars and killed and hurt people too, then this can be a solution to improve connectivity. Sometimes we might need to restore damaged habitat. This is a picture from northern Idaho. If you look really closely in the middle, you might see there's some pretty big vehicles in there. There's an excavator, there's a bulldozer, there's a backhoe. And it's kind of funny that conservation organizations would be using this equipment, but we do. This is a place that used to have streams flowing through it, that used to flood every year. It was a very rich wetland. It's very important for wildlife, and especially as the world continues to warm with climate change, we need to have these places that are cool and wet. And that's really important for animals like bumblebees, even for slugs that aren't able to travel long distances. It's not like a slug can say, hey, it's getting pretty hot here. I need to move 100 kilometers north. They're not able to do that. So Yellowstone to Yukon and our partners work in some areas to do restoration projects, and that helps multiple species. If you're a grizzly bear that's on a long distance movement, you might stop here for a few days. But if you are a bird, you might come through here seasonally as you migrate north and south. And if you're a bumblebee, you probably live in this area for your whole life. So restoration in the key places helps us to make those stepping stones and helps improve ecological connectivity for animals that need to move a long distance, and helps improve habitat in the small areas where animals don't move very much. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about too, in addition to our work with Yellowstone to Yukon, is about science. I want to really emphasize that there are lots of ways to be a scientist. So this is a picture of me on the left-hand side. That was in the Yukon, taken a few years ago when I was doing some field work. I was helping some students with the research that they were doing, tagging along to learn about the area. And that's called doing field work. It's where you go outside. Sometimes we think of a field as being a farmer's field, but scientists really mean it when they say we're going outside to study nature. That's one way of doing it. And I do some of that. But a lot of science happens in meetings and in indoor activities, like stuff in the middle. That is a really important part of research and of conservation. We have to have people talking together, especially when we can safely meet together, to discuss what our findings, to say, this is what I think is happening. Is that what you think is happening too? To make sure that we have the same understanding, and to understand how people feel about what are some of the solutions. How might that affect them that maybe we haven't thought about? As well, many people do lab work for science, like the woman who's on the right-hand side. And we need all of those things. So I wouldn't want people to think that science is just one way of doing it. One of the great things about exploring by the seat of your pants is that there are so many different scientists who come to talk to classrooms from all over the world, doing all kinds of work. Science needs everyone. I also want to emphasize that you are never too young nor too old to help nature. I think that sometimes young people get told, well, just have to wait till you're older. For some things we do. We have to wait till we're 16 to learn to drive a car. We have to wait till we're older to be able to vote. But You can help nature at any time. You can help your parents, you can help your friends, you can help other people in your community. You can speak up for what you want. You are never too young nor too old to help nature. I want to show you some pictures of young people in the Yellowstone to Yukon region who are doing that kind of work. Up on the upper left, you'll see that there are young people who come to community meetings, and that's where we talk about the towns that we live in and the futures that we want. What kind of vision do we want to have? When that little girl is my age, what will her future be like? What do we want for her? What does she want? Beside her, you can see two smiling faces beside this big pile of, what is that? That brown stuff is called lichen. And lichen was harvested off trees so that caribou, who are endangered in that area, will have something to eat. So these kids are helping to help that endangered animal by working with their parents, working with others in their community to collect food for this endangered animal. The boy on the bottom left is learning to use bear spray, and that's a cardboard cutout of a bear. It's not a real bear. And sometimes people think, ooh, bear spray, doesn't that hurt the bear? Well, you hardly ever want to use it, but if you do, it helps to keep you safe, and it helps to keep the bear safe because it teaches the bear, you don't want to mess around with people. So this is a really good action that helps wildlife and people to coexist, helps to keep this boy safe as he and his family are out recreating outside, and helps to keep the bear safe if it comes too close to people. And then the bottom right is a screenshot of a wonderful video that you can find online. And this is a story that was done by the Stony Nakota Audiovisual Club. And they did a little movie, it's only a few minutes long, about helping how animals can help get across the road. And wonderfully, it has subtitles in Nakota. So this helps people to understand different ways of knowing that science isn't the only way that we understand the world, and different languages too. These pictures are just some of the young scientists that I've worked with over the last 5 years at Yellowstone to Yukon. And it is wonderful for me to be able to do that. I learned so much from them. They have a lot of excitement and energy and enthusiasm for this work about conservation and about nature. I learn as much or more from them as they learn from me. And just as I start to finish, and I'm looking forward to your questions, I want to remind you that Yellowstone to Yukon, which is that green area in the upper left, this is just one of many large landscape conservation projects around the world. So all of the purple blobs on here, these are all other places where people are thinking on that big scale and thinking, we need to figure out how wildlife, people can coexist. How do we share these landscapes? And they know that animals need to move, and that we can't just think very small scale anymore. We have to think big, and we have to think long term. And it feels so good to know that Yellowstone to Yukon, which is probably the oldest and probably the best known of these large landscape conservation projects, we're not the only one. And we are learning from others just as they are learning from us. So there are many places you could go to learn about these things. So some of you might live in these areas that are covered by the purple shapes. And so even if you don't, there are other kinds of conservation or organizations or work going on in your region. So it's not just about the Yellowstone to Yukon region, it's about the whole world. If you want to learn more about Yellowstone to Yukon and the work that we and our partners do, you can check it out online. This is our website for videos. There are many, many different videos. I love watching them. They range from a couple minutes long to over an hour. And they're about all kinds of different topics. So I've just chosen 5 here. The one on the upper left is about how Indigenous people in northern British Columbia are helping caribou that are facing extinction. On the bottom left is one of the young scientists that I work with, Miriam Barreto. She studies wolverines, and it's a lovely film about her research. On the upper right, you can see pictures of people with their horses, and they're talking about why they really want to protect some of the most important places in Alberta, what that means for their heritage, for their families. On the bottom right is called Living with Wildlife. And that's how a town in Alberta, actually the town that I live in, called Canmore, has worked to live with wildlife, worked to do things like cleaning up some of the garbage that we had lying around town, working on wildlife crossing structures, those bridges that help animals get from one side of the road to the other, and thinking about where we should be building houses and not being building houses so that animals can still move past the town without getting kind of stuck in it. And then in the middle, if you have the opportunity to watch this via PBS or Nova, this is a film called Wild Ways. It's an hour long, and it shows two of my favorite places on Earth. It focuses a lot on East and Southern Africa and how animals like elephants have to travel long distances, and also on the Yellowstone to Yukon region in North America and how animals have to travel long, long distances. So those are just a handful. There's a lot more that you can check out. And so I'll end in just a minute. And I want to invite you, if your families, if your teachers are on, can help you use the internet, or if you're using social media, you can look up what Yellowstone to Yukon is working on. And no matter where you are in the world, you can help to protect and connect habitat so that people and nature can thrive. That's what I love working on. And I really hope that you will be able to help join us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to talk to Jesse.
Aerin, what fun that was. Holy, I love your presentations. I could watch them all day long, and I do sometimes. I do want to encourage all our classes, again, check out those resources. We'll make sure you have the sites, the links to those videos, absolutely everything. I know we had a few classes that aren't able to make it live today, so we'll talk to our live classes and the folks who have the chance to watch us in the future, which is great. What we're going to do before we dive in with our Q&A is our Kahoot quiz. So Miss Shelton's class live, you guys can get ready with this. Anyone on YouTube, we've got a whole bunch of folks joining us there. Please feel free to come in on the Kahoot. We are going to play our game here. Some of you might be new to Kahoot, including Aerin. And so how this works, the faster you answer, the more points you get. You don't win anything, but you do win Aerin and I's everlasting respect. So we're going to dive with some questions in a minute. We've got Focused Iguana and Zany Hamster. I don't think those are real names. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's an auto-generated one. We're hoping. There's interesting parents these days. You never know. But let's dive in. For people watching in later, we can get you guys this link as well. You can play along anytime. But what we'll do, Aerin, is we'll give people some help with like a few seconds to spare. So how far is it? How long is this Yellowstone to Yukon corridor? Is it 500 kilometers? I know we got some Americans today too. So 300 miles? Is it 600 miles? Is it 2,000 miles? Or is it like 10,000 miles? Is it crazy big? What do we think? We got an answer coming in. Oh, so our two people, you both guessed 1,000 and no, a little over 3,000, which is ridiculous. Like, it's so huge. I'm trying to think of
so big.
Like, so would that be, I'm in near Toronto. That's Toronto to what? Like more than Florida? Yeah. It's huge.
Probably that far.
It's
yeah.
ridiculous. I love it.
Maybe all the way out to Canmore where I live.
Yeah. All right. So what are some species that will be protected in the Yellowstone to Yukon corridor? So again, for those who are used to my Kahoots, never listen to my picture. Ignore my pictures always. They're always lies. So elephants, bison, bighorn sheep, or caribou. It's more than one answer. So what do you think lives in this yellow? We've talked about a few of these. We showcased some pictures of a few of these. Keep thinking with those answers. I don't think there's any elephants in Alberta, BC, down in the US.
Not yet.
You all got bighorn sheep. None of you picked caribou or bison. So caribou and bison, big parts of those ecosystems are the most iconic mammals in the country. Friendly Impala takes our lead. More of you are joining our Kahoot, which is great. Keep those things coming. Okay, another multi-select. So this is more than one pick. So don't just pick one, everything that applies. Now, Aerin talked about a lot of these. What are some strategies that the Yellowstone to Yukon Initiative is doing to protect the habitat? Are they making highways safer? Are they protecting wetlands? Are they hunting all the wolves? There's too many wolves. What are we doing with them? Are we talking with everyone? Are we making sure that everyone feels involved with us? Now, you got a chance to see some of these pictures. 14 of you now in. See, you got on board. So yes, A, B, and D. We're not hunting all the wolves. There's sometimes in conservation, we do need to hunt certain species for certain reasons, but we're certainly not taking out all the wolves. They are an important part of that ecosystem. Legend Sea Lion takes our lead. Aerin, one more question, and we're done. We're diving in with questions after this. It's exciting. How can you help Yellowstone to Yukon? Now, can you tell your friends that you've learned? Can you visit yourself, go to these places and explore them? Can you write on behalf of places you love? Or, and a big hint here, I like to do this a lot in these Kahoots, all of the above. For any of you who live in or have had the chance to visit, these are really spectacular places. I've been to Banff. I've been to BC before. All the above. Most of you got this right. Okay, our podium, Aerin. It's so much pressure. Wonderhawk comes in third. If you are any of these people, let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Legend Sea Lion. Oh, that last one came in second. Number one. Sturdy cheetah, very un-Yellowstone to Yukon animal, but way to go, Sturdy cheetah. We like you very much. Nice job, guys.
Those are great names.
They really are. We love them. We are going to go into our question period now. Miss Shelton's class joining us in Benicia, California. If you guys want to unmute your mic and come on in to start, we got some coming in from YouTube as well. Miss Shelton, hey guys, unmute.
Say hi.
Hi.
I'm Sophia. And how do grizzly bears help other animals?
Oh, hi, Sophia. It's nice to meet you. So your question was, how do grizzly bears hunt other animals? Is that right? Yeah. So the grizzly bears it would depend on the animal they're hunting. So you want to have a different strategy depending on the different animal. So in some places, grizzly bears will hunt for fish. So they'll go fishing. So especially when salmon are migrating back up through the streams at different times of the year, usually in the late summer or the fall, grizzly bears sometimes will stand in the middle of the stream and the salmon basically jump at them. In other places, they might go dive down underneath the water and bite one. And in some places, they might be using their claws. So that's for fish. In other places, especially in the springtime when animals like deer or elk have their babies, so they have fawns, so little small deer and elk, it's actually pretty easy for grizzly bears to hunt them. The only thing they have to be careful of is mom, because mom is not into that. So the female elk or female deer would protect their young, of course. So a grizzly bear might be looking through some of the places where maybe the female deer or moose or elk has hidden her fawns, hidden her calves, maybe in tall grass, maybe in the bushes. And so grizzly bears they'll be using their big nose to be able to smell that. And especially when they're first born, these fawns don't have much smell. So the grizzly bear has to try pretty hard, might be watching for different cues, different things. And then when it gets there, it would use its big teeth and its big claws to hunt that animal. So different strategies depending on what they're doing. They also eat all kinds of bugs, which is amazing. And they don't eat just one or two bugs. They eat thousands and thousands of bugs. So especially these different moths or ants that might be underneath big logs. One of the reasons grizzly bears have those big claws is to help them dig. So they use their massive shoulder muscles, their big paws and their big claws to turn over those logs and to dig and to be able to eat up all of those insects. So all kinds of strategies.
My favorite joy of all these programs is when scientists do the pantomime of the creatures they're talking about. So thank you very much for that. If you want to do the sniffing thing again at any point in the broadcast, just throw that back in.
Yeah, exactly like that.
One of our questions came in on YouTube. Where are these bridges? So you showcase these overpasses. Are they everywhere along the highway? Are they in all the highways? Like, how many of these exist and where might people find them along this entire corridor?
So there's more than 100. There's I think there's about 120. And some of those bridges go over the big busy highways and some of them go underneath. There's a lot more of the ones that go underneath than there are over, but there's a lot of both. And so they're all over the place. There's a lot that are in Montana. There's in Alberta, in the national parks. They're actually going to be building one right outside the national park. We've been waiting for a long time for that, and it's finally happening. In British Columbia, I drove through one when on my way to get here. There's lots of them.
Well, kudos to you guys for that advocacy. I know we talked about that in the last broadcast we had with you, so it's really exciting to see that starting to come to fruition. Having driven through Banff myself, it's really amazing to see these structures. Like, they're incredible structures, and I know from all the video evidence you guys collect, they're so effective at sort of channeling animals in a safe and effective way. So I'm again, way to go.
They are, and they pay for themselves. They're expensive to build, but because they save a lot of money from roadkill, it actually pays for themselves in 10 years. They make sense.
See, it's that sort of thing that's like the ultimate case of these things. I love when we get stats like that. So thank you for that. Aerin's the best. I'm so glad we have so many classes that register for today's program. We've got a lot of kids in this whole month of February that they get the chance to hear from such amazing scientists, and they're really curious, like, what's the job like? Is there a favorite part of your job, a least favorite part of your job? If someone was to become you, what would you tell them about?
I was thinking about this morning. What would I say to my younger self? So I would say a couple of things. All days are different. One of the things that I love the most about the job is that it's so varied. one day I'm in meetings, and the next day I might be working outside. I might be crunching through data and numbers on my computer. I might be talking to people like this. So there's a lot of variety. And if you're somebody who likes doing a lot of different things, it might be a good job for you. It's not always, nothing is always rosy. Nothing is always perfect. So there are some hard parts too. You have to really be tenacious. And that's a big word that means you have to stick in for the long haul. So have a vision of where you want to get to and be willing to work hard to get there. And there's bumps along the way. Sometimes things don't work out the way you're expecting. You got to go with the flow and be like, okay, this is what we're doing now, and be willing to try that. I think that in conservation, there are many jobs that are not about science. So I work for an organization that's about 35, maybe 38 people. Most people they might use science in some part of their job, but they might not be doing research. We have people who are accountants, people who are business managers, people who work much more with the public or in fundraising, people who work with government. So it takes all kinds of people to make that whole stuff work together, right? It's all about collaboration. But I love science because it's so varied. And I love being like, I wonder why that is that way. How can we study this? What does that mean? I'm going to play around with that for a while and figure it out.
Doing backward. It freezes me. Are we good?
Oh,
I think we're good.
here.
We're back. Sorry about that for a second. Yeah. But I'm sorry we did cut off the last little bit of your question there, but I love this thing that, so many of our scientists and explorers have started talking about this, that no matter what you're interested in, if you want to be a deep sea person, if you want to be conservation, if you want to be in space, no matter what your skill set, there's a role for you there, which is so, so important. I'm glad you highlighted the specific example. I really do encourage our class. Check out y2y.net. You can see all the amazing work they do. You can see their staff. You can see how many different roles that they have in this organization. And it's such a special opportunity to make a positive difference no matter what you happen to be really, really good at. So I'm so glad we got that question. Aerin, let's head back to Miss Shelton's class. Time flies when you're having fun. We got time for about 2 more questions, but come on back in California. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, you were.
Hi, I'm Rawson. My question is, how do you know how far animals travel?
Oh, thank you for the question. How do you know how far animals travel? So it would be really easy if we could just ask them, isn't it? If we could just be like, excuse me, Moose, could you tell me how far you've been today? But it isn't. So scientists use different ways to tell that. One of the ways that they use is radio collars. So you may have seen pictures sometimes, and an animal has a collar around its neck, and usually there's a big battery that's at the bottom. They used to be pretty heavy. There's a limit to how heavy they have to be because the animal, you don't want to hurt the animal, you don't want to change its movement. So it's kind of like, how your dog wears a collar and it's okay moving around. They've got lighter and lighter and lighter as technology gets better. So now some of them are really quite light. You can have tiny little ones that people put onto birds or put onto amphibians, and those are really small animals. So that's a way that actually tracks where the animal goes. And the modern ones today use satellite technology. So every day the scientists might do it on their phone, pick up their phone and be like, how far has it gone today? And the computers and the satellites work together with the collar to help understand where the animal was in the morning, and then maybe 2 hours later, and then 3 hours later, and 4 hours later, because it's talking to satellites. Other ways that you can tell is if you can identify an individual animal. And so that means that there has to be a pattern on the animal, like a pattern on its coat, or some really characteristic marking, like maybe it has a really unusual scar, or something like that, or it has like a really funny like kink in its tail. And so I know that's one. And then if you see it on a camera somewhere, and then later you see it on a camera a long distance away, you know that it had to get between those 2 places. Unlike a collar, you wouldn't know the exact route it took to get there. You would only know it was here and now it's here. So they help to tell us different things in different ways. And there's lots of different ways to do it. There's pros and cons for all of them. Some take a really long time. Some are more expensive or less expensive that we can use.
You highlighted at the end of your talk and in the Kahoot quiz, we talked about some of these ways that people can help something like the Yellowstone to Yukon initiative. Now, we've got kids all over North America today and beyond. And so if you're in somewhere local, maybe you want to do something for conservation, is there something when you got started in conservation that really jumped out to you? Like, what can every individual kid do, no matter what their age, to get started in this field that you'd recommend?
So it's never too early to start. You can start when you're 8 years old. You can start when you're 5 years old. And one of the best ways to do it is to start talking to people about what you care about. And that start with the people who are closest to you, with your family. Ask your family, I want to watch more movies, more documentaries about wildlife. Ask your parents, can you take me to a local park? Can we go with a guide, with an interpreter, go with a ranger to learn about animals in your area? Start to notice that. And then we can all do small things to help reduce our impact on the environment. And that's everything from composting and recycling to using active transportation, like maybe we ride our bikes or walk to school. And those are individual actions. But we can also speak up louder. We can speak up bigger. And that means that you can write letters to people who make decisions in your town. You saw a picture of that little girl who was at a public meeting. Go to, ask your parents and or family members to take you. And to learn about how decisions are being made in your town, and to tell people what you care about. You live in these places too. You don't have to wait until you're old to talk about the things you care about. So those are some really early ones. Educate yourself, read about things, talk to other people. And if you can, you see about doing a class project on a particular area, ask your teacher, can we go on a field trip somewhere? Maybe you won't be able to, maybe it's too far away. So what could you do just in the schoolyard? Are there birds you can learn about? Really, there's no end to the things that you could do. It just takes somebody to have a spark and someone to say, I want to do something. Does anybody else want to do it with me?
Aerin, that was a beautiful answer. So well thought. That was fantastic. Classes, I really do. Again, check out Yellowstone Yukon's website. Let me bring that up for everybody again. They're doing such amazing work. Certainly in Canada, when I think of great conservation, I think of Aerin. I think of Yellowstone Yukon. It's an amazing program, an amazing project. So many ways of getting involved. So do check that out. And again, get out and explore. It all starts with getting outside. If you use something like the Seek or iNaturalist app, they're great ways of learning about those species near you. If you go to national, provincial, city parks and go and see what lives near you in Canada, the US, beyond, it's just such a special opportunity to connect with wildlife. It's hard to really love and cherish something unless you understand it, and that starts with going exploring. So Aerin, thank you so much for doing all the exploring that you do and getting to share all this fantastic stuff with us today. As you know from your first broadcast, I'm going to bring in our class to say a big thank you and farewell. And if you want to stick around for a minute afterwards, we can have a little chat. But Ms. Shelton's class, thank you guys so much for joining today in California. You